Hello and welcome. I'm Tafara Gadamu. Over 40,000 Eritrean and South Sudanese refugees, Israel calls them, of course, infiltrators, are facing forced deportation or relocation to prison facilities by the end of this month. What is happening? Israel's Ambassador Rapheal Morav joins me to look into those and other issues on the bilateral relations between Ethiopia and Israel. A very warm welcome to the program.
Very pleased to be welcome to this show and to answer your questions.
You were appointed as your country's ambassador to Ethiopia. When was it? In December of last year?
Yeah, end of November, yes.
You just did, 3 months already, and we're not going to talk about what you've done as your country's ambassador to Ethiopia, obviously. But I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to do that in the years ahead. But other than that, what are your priorities here when you look forward to your 3 years as ambassador in Ethiopia?
Okay, so let's start by stating that we have already excellent relations between the two countries. We have strong cooperation and contacts at the highest level. So I start from a rather higher point. But of course, there's much room to deepen the cooperation, and I think also to show tangible results for the excellent relations.
In which areas?
The form of economic cooperation. So I focus on encouraging Israeli investment in Ethiopia, bringing Israeli companies to explore business opportunities, and as well as to enlarge our cooperation in development with the government of Ethiopia.
Development meaning you want to do that through Morav? Is that what?
That's right. So Morav, which is the Israeli Agency for International Cooperation and Development, has already several projects here. The flagship one is in avocado, whereas we have introduced export quality avocado varieties in Ethiopia through nurseries, and now they have already started to be exported to Europe. So it is a success because there's a high demand for that in the international markets. And of course, we will expand it to as far as possible to the various regions of Ethiopia because the conditions for growing avocado are good. We have other projects of cooperation in the irrigation, to introduce irrigation. As you may be aware, only 5% of the arable land in Ethiopia is irrigated, so if you just double the land irrigated, so you can triple and even more the yield.
You're not necessarily talking about drip irrigation because in many parts of Ethiopia we have sufficient amount of water to use.
Yes, so water you have, but the thing is that only 5% of the arable cultivated area in Ethiopia is irrigated, so you have room to increase much more the irrigation, and in this way to increase the agricultural production by many folds. And also through irrigation you can introduce fertilization and improve much better the quality of the agricultural production.
But primarily your focus would be, other than that, your focus would be on investment in Ethiopia. You're trying to attract many more Israeli companies to business in Ethiopia. Which are this?
Yeah, I believe that there are many opportunities for Israeli companies. First of all, we are not very distant in geographical terms. We are a country that was based on agriculture as Ethiopia today, and we made the transformation that the Ethiopian government is now conducting. So we have a lot of experience and knowledge to share with Ethiopia. And we have very good partnership with the government of Ethiopia to follow on that.
And last week you had the Agri-Tech seminar here in Addis Ababa. Basically, you're targeting the upcoming big exhibition in Israel.
Yes, we'll have from May 8th to 10th in Tel Aviv, Israel, one of the most important conventions and exhibitions on agricultural technologies. And we had, so we made a promotion seminar last week in Addis Ababa with the participation of the Minister of Agriculture and Natural Resources, entitled Israeli Technological Solutions to Ethiopian Needs. And we brought an expert from Israel who spoke about what Israel can offer and has to offer to increase the agricultural production in Ethiopia, starting from irrigation, as we discussed, fertilizers, quality seeds, post-harvest treatment, and all the production chain of in agriculture.
So you've secured the Ethiopian participation at that big exhibition coming up in May?
So there is a delegation that is a business delegation conducted, managed by the Chamber of Commerce of Ethiopia. I think there are about 20 to 30 participants, and on top of it we'll have an official delegation led by either the minister or the state minister of agriculture.
This is a sudden shift in our discussion, but how many Ethiopian Jews do you have in do you believe that there are Ethiopian Jews left behind who have not migrated to Israel?
It's not a question of belief. It's an established fact. Yes, there are about 8,000 to 9,000 Jews who are waiting to be reunited with their families in Israel. And there's a government decision from 2015 to bring them to Israel.
But that decision has been shelved in a way because you've picked a few and that's about it.
No,
you've stopped
that's definitely not the case. The decision is bound by budget allocation, and therefore it will be spread over several years. And just I can inform you that the last year we had repatriated 1,300. And this year there will be about the same size, maybe a bit more, 1,500. But that is the size, the capacity that we can absorb every year in terms of budget, because you have to understand that these people arrive with virtually nothing, no money, no household, nothing. So it means that the Israeli government has to provide them housing, to teach them the Hebrew language, to education, everything. So it has budget implications, and therefore it is spread over time according to the budget capacity.
That's not what Avram Negusi is, a lawmaker who chairs the Israeli Parliament Absorption and Diaspora Committee. I'm sure you're familiar with that name.
Sure.
He said that he accused his government of discrimination, saying it makes it easier for other diaspora communities to immigrate. It's only the Ethiopian Jewish community that is being targeted, not the Americans, not the Russians, not the European Jews.
Well,
and here a guy who is a lawmaker.
Yes, Knesset member Abraham Negosa. I had a lot of respect with him, and I met with him several times in Israel. But he's a politician, and so I'm not going to argue with him over your show on his claims. But I definitely disagree with what he says.
You disagree, but doesn't his argument hold water?
No. I can repeat again that there is a government decision which is being implemented, and that every year, according budget capacity, maybe Abraham Negosa can find bigger budgets. But budget is also a question of political discussion between the coalition members. But as it stands now, the budget allows more or less 1,500 per year, and that's exactly what the government is doing every year. We are not in a position to bring, let's say, 5,000 or 10,000 when we have no housing to provide them and no schools to put the children. So it's not a case of emergency.
But I guess it is. When was it, in November or December? You visited the communities which were very close to where your embassy is. Yes, it's really an emergency because the kids are not getting proper schooling. They are basically stateless, although they are going to school. They are not going to proper. Most of them don't have enough earnings because they are in transit, or they consider themselves in transition, and most of them are very, very poor. It's very hard to get work because almost all of them came from the rural villages, and you have people who are separated from their families for 16 to 17 years. For example, one of the community leaders, his mother and his father are in Israel, as are 3 or 4 of his siblings. He and a couple of his brothers and one cousin are left behind. 16 to 17 years.
Yes.
That's an emergency situation.
No, it is a sad case and maybe a humanitarian case, but there is no emergency. They're Ethiopians. It's not that they're stateless, and they have all the civil rights like any Ethiopians. And they're not the only poor in Ethiopia, regretfully. But
they are uprooted from their communities in the villages.
Yeah, they choose to do so.
But shouldn't you tell them to go back until the time arrives when they are planning
We
to go
did
there?
try, but they made their choice to come to Addis, thinking that in this way it will put pressure on the government to increase the number of those who will be allowed to come to Israel. But it's not the case. And it's up to their choice that they came here. Some stayed in the villages. Some are in Gondar, more in Gondar than in Addis. But the government will implement the decision that it has decided, and it will take, as I said, 2 or 3 more years. And I can assure that if we meet in 4 years' time, I will be.
They will have all migrated to Israel.
Yes, yes.
Fair enough. How many refugees do you have in Israel? I'm talking about African refugees, primarily Eritrean and Southern Sudanese.
Okay, so first of all, let's use the right terminology. We're not talking about refugees. We're talking about migrants, either illegal or work migrants, illegal migrants. Yes, indeed, mainly
actually call them infiltrators.
Yes, infiltrators.
The Prime Minister.
That's the term. Someone who enters illegally in your country is called that infiltrators, and that's exactly the term.
All the refugees that we have in this country, close to 1 million of them, are not legally here. They just cross the border.
We do not have refugees. We have illegal migrants. A small amount of them have requested for asylum status. And they got for example, all of from who came from South Sudan, 300 of them, they have received the asylum in Israel. The other
out of what, 60,000 perhaps, Southern Sudanese and Eritreans. Some say it's over 30,000.
Most of them, we're talking about 40,000 illegal immigrants.
And only 600 got what legal?
As I said, most of them are from Sudan and Eritrea, and they are mostly illegal immigrants. They're working migrants. As they go to Europe or to the States or to other countries, some of them reach Israel. Now the border is sealed, so it has stopped. And now we try to relocate them in safe countries. Most of them do not want to return to their countries, so we have arrangement with other countries.
Like which ones? Which ones in Africa? Rwanda and Uganda.
I don't know. The countries have not been disclosed, so I cannot relate to them. But I can assure that these are safe.
The traditional destinations for those refugees, whatever you want to call them, being deported, the destination has been Rwanda. Is that correct?
Some of them may have been relocated in Rwanda. Yes, it is possible. I mean, I saw some reports on that. And I think it's a very good place. Rwanda is a model country for good governance, and it's doing very well. As you know, its president is now the president of the African Union. So it's definitely one of the possibilities that these migrants can choose if they don't want to return to their home country.
That's not what the refugees say who have been deported to Rwanda. Some of them have made it to Uganda because that's not the safest place to live in.
Some of them even try to go again to Europe. So as I said, there are work migrants who don't want to return they don't want to stay in Africa for their own reasons, but and they try to, if it doesn't work in Israel, so they go to Uganda or they go to Europe, and it's their choice. We propose them to have a respectable life in another country. We give them some financial encouragement for that. And if they choose to retry their chance by going to Europe or other destination, believing in the dream that the paradise is there, it's up to their choice. We have the duty as a country to protect our borders and to determine our migration policy and to decide who we want to receive in Israel and who we don't want to receive, like any country, including Ethiopia.
Well, Ethiopia is home to close to 1 million refugees from at least 4 or 5 countries.
I'm aware of that.
And we call them refugees.
Yes.
Yeah. And we treat them as such.
That's very good. Yes, with the international help.
And I think the UNHCR is disappointed with what you have done with those refugees, because you are signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, right? You're not. Well, what your critics say, basically, I'm airing those concerns, is that you give them a different name so that you can just kick them out of your country, but they are essentially refugees.
What is your definition of refugees?
The UNHCR has been concerned about your actions of deporting those people, because they say they call them draft dodgers in Eritrea. So they are going to be persecuted. There is political persecution and so on and so forth. That has been very well documented by a number of international agencies. But
do you suggest that we absorb in Israel all the soldiers that are drafted in Eritrean army?
No, they go to different places. And one of them happens to be in Israel. And you are a democracy. You are a democracy, right?
Yes, and we have a policy of open borders, but we have also a migration policy. And like every other country, we have the right, according to international conventions, and I'm thankful that you mentioned that,
so
and under the supervision of the Supreme Court that has
reversed the
that has reached an agreement that has rejected the claims that this policy is done is not done according to the international rules. So we do a process like any other European, American, or democratic country that does. As I say, those who are real asylum seeker, according to their stories and according to interviews and according cross-checking the information that they provide, they will get the status that they are entitled to have in Israel. Those who are just work migrants because they want to have a better future than in Eritrea and Sudan, it's not up to us then.
My question is, how do you reach that conclusion? Once you define these people, you label these people infiltrators, then it ends there.
Because we make there are procedures how to check the information. You can check in Eritrea. We have an embassy there. There are different ways how to know if someone telling you his story is real or not. And I will even surprise you that there are some Ethiopians among them who claim to be Eritrean because they know that being Eritrean they have better chances to get a humanitarian status in.
Because this is a country where it has established that people have to, crossing the border illegally, have to be shot on sight. And these are the people who are crossing the Sinai and making it to Israel. Like, for example, we have how many, 30,000 perhaps Eritreans in Israel, and how many of them have been defined as refugees and treated as such? How many of them? Not even 100. Not even 100. So all the rest, close to 30,000 Eritreans came to Israel just because they wanted to work, better life and so on. None of them are politically persecuted. None of them, yes. That's what you've decided.
No, that's what we have concluded. That's what we have concluded. The fact that someone is drafted in the army and doesn't want to serve the army, and maybe the conditions are harsh, it's not up to us to make any judgment, but does not entitle him then a status of
What do you make of the UNHCR's concerns? Because the UNHCR urged your country not to forcibly deport African refugees or asylum seekers. That's what it has decided. And it has concrete evidence that they are actually refugees. And is the refugee agency speaking?
Yes, so therefore, I fully agree. We do not deport, as I said from the beginning. We relocate them in safe countries. Or those who refuse, we don't force them. Those who refuse, they are in detention centers.
Is the Negev desert close to the Egyptian border?
In the Negev, yes. I don't know if it's near to the Egyptian border, but
and many of them don't want to return, not only to Eritrea and South Sudan, but also to a third country. What do you do with them? Keep them in detention centers?
Yes. Yes. What to do? Yes.
And what about the people who have been of hunger strike?
I'm not aware of that, but that's certainly not the solution. So we, as I said, we tried very hard to convince them through financial incentives to go to safe countries.
What are $3,500 and a one-way ticket? Is that a financial incentive, you think?
I think it's pretty pretty incentive for coming to restart a decent life in a country if they want. But I think basically all they want is to go to Europe or to the US if given the chance to leave Israel. But we cannot solve the problems of all the world and of the poor in the world. We think that we should help the countries of origin, and that's what we do in having a better governance, to have inclusive development, and the solution should be found in these countries. The solution that these countries are, we led them to the young generation to leave the country is certainly not the solution.
Yeah, but that's, we're talking about people who are in your country. We are not Israeli citizens. And this is not what the Holocaust survivors said. They wrote a letter to your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he has to stop these, what they were very explicit in their letter, deportation of Africans from Israel. This is not how Israel was founded. Israel was founded as a safe haven for Jews. This is not the Israeli way. That's what the Holocaust survivors say. And they have explicitly written a letter to your Prime Minister to stop this deportation.
Yes. So it demonstrates that, first of all, as an open democracy in Israel, there are various views from extreme with those who say that we shall absorb all of them, and from those who say...
But these are Holocaust survivors. These are Holocaust survivors.
And there are other citizens in Israel who have different opinions and who think that there are too many challenges to receive these people economically and culturally. There are different views in Israel. It's not, one view. And the Holocaust survivors, of course, they have all the respect to their views, but sometimes maybe they do wrong comparison, because we're not talking about a Holocaust situation in none of these countries. Sudan is a safe and stable country. Eritrea has harsh conditions maybe, but it's definitely not, there are no Holocaust situation. So the comparison are too easy to do in order to try to convince, but if you look to the fact, it's not the case. And as I said, in any case, the migration policy of Israel is not to be open to all the poor or miserable people of the world. We're not going to solve the problems in this way.
But, well, those Holocaust survivors have a point, according to your critics, because many of the Israeli politicians have said out in public that the refugees, which make quite a population in South Tel Aviv, have turned it into a slum. So they are changing the Jewish demographic. It smacks of racism.
It has nothing to do with racism. Israel is the national state of the Jewish people, and we want to remain with a majority of Jews. It's totally legitimate, and it's the raison d'etre of this country. And we have no reason a priori to encourage migration from other nations that have nothing to do with our religion, with our culture, with our history, with the reason why this country is established. That's as I said, the raison d'etre. That's the reason why we exist. It's the national state of the Jewish people.
And it will stay that way.
It will stay in that way, yes, of course.
And does it tally with the way Israel as a polity evolves as a democratic state?
Well, being the national state of the Jewish people does not mean that there are no minorities. We have 17% of Arab minority in Israel. There are some of them mostly Muslims, but we have Christians, we have Ethiopian Christians in Israel. You have really all the regions that you can imagine, you find them in Israel. So it's an open democratic country where minorities enjoy all the rights, and there's a very high tolerance for...
The deadline is approaching for these people to make a decision.
Indeed.
By the end of this month.
Yeah.
So does it mean that you are going to round them up? And all these 30,000, 40,000 refugees in Tel Aviv or whatever, and then throw them in the Negev desert? That's what you're going to do?
I'm not a prophet, and I'm not
The deadline is approaching, because you gave 60 days to leave the country. Take $3,000 a one-way ticket out of Israel. If they don't do that, you're going to round them up from Tel Aviv in broad daylight and send them to the Negev desert. That's why you're going to do
one of the options. Another option could be maybe to extend the deadline if we see that it basically succeeds. There are different options, and it's not does not have to be necessarily in a drastic, dramatic way that the media will be able to show some drama.
Certainly, is not going to portray Israel in good light.
It's not just a matter of image. There are some interest and some duties that the government has to implement, and if it's not popular, so it has to do it even if it's not popular.
Well, Ambassador Morav, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on my show.
It has been a great pleasure to me. Thank you.